Bethany,
Yes.
does your mother have this book?
I think it's in a garage.
I haven't seen. I wanted that. I was gonna ask.
I think I
If
do.
you have another
I think
one.
it's in the garage.
Well, if you don't, you can borrow this.
Yes,
This
I'll
is the
borrow
one
that
I
one.
write up on a lot.
Yes.
I guess. But there are a couple of articles here that are relevant.
Oh, yeah, it is.
A little out of date, but historically.
Her keys were around her neck.
Oh.
Sorry. Okay.
Let's see. Social movements. Latino movement.
I don't. Tell them what you need, because I kind of said something about the immigration or. The
Okay, yeah, because what I'm writing the paper is about the change from field workers, how they were treated and how things were before and after the whole movement, and there's hardly any information about what it was like before. There's a lot of things about the protests and the strikes, but not a lot about how the conditions were and things like that.
Okay, in this book, there are a couple, they're kind of in a row. California Farm Worker, Forgotten Man.
Oh, perfect.
That's, it ran in the Sacramento Bee, the Fresno Bee, way back in '73 when I wrote it. But it's a history of agricultural labor in California, you know, it includes the Okies, the Filipinos, all of that. And it's the history of that. And then the next one is, it was Caesar's funeral. Some came to praise Caesar while others stood far away. It was his funeral.
Did you go?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, and the Strawberry Pickers Shall Lead. It's another one. When I was up in Monterey, the strawberry pickers went on strike.
Oh.
Okay. And so that article deals with that. And then labor unions in the '70s, that's a good background for you. Labor movement, because the UFW is a labor movement. But when the AFL-CIO was created and Congress passed the collective bargaining law, they specifically excluded agricultural labor. Because there were so many senators from the Deep South.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to do that. So farm labor was never covered by the National Labor Relations Act, which allowed employees to organize and form unions. Agriculture was excluded. So it wasn't until Caesar tried it that they, after that, the AFL-CIO was feeling guilty, so they brought him in as an affiliate of the AFL-CIO. That was, you know, during Caesar's time. So then they became part of the labor movement. And that's really how they won the grape strike. It wasn't, the boycott wasn't really won, certainly not in this area. And it was won in other parts of the United States because labor unions supported it by boycotting markets.
I'll see you guys later.
Hi.
Yeah, boycotting markets, and then European countries that are very labor, they refused to take the grapes off the ships, or they took them off and dumped them in the water.
Like the Tea Party.
Like the Tea Party, yeah. And that's eventually what got the growers to the table to negotiate.
Wow.
It was a boycott out of this area.
I'm sure.
Ronald Reagan was governor at the time, and I was in the legislature, and he made a point of buying grapes, you know, for the state hospitals and the prisons and all that kind of stuff, trying to support the growers. He even bought a case of grapes for every one of the members of the legislature. And they put them in front of our doors, the office, and we went and dumped them in front of his office.
Wow.
We did, yeah. I mean, you know, he was trying to be slick, you know.
Wow.
So anyway, these three or four chapters, you can follow them. Start with the history one. That'll give you. California labor agriculture has never been really family farm. They call it family farm as family farms that have 6,000 acres. You know, it's not like the Midwest where they have 100 acres or so. family farms here, like the Jamaras, the Georgios, Kavakoviches. I mean, those guys, they're family corporations.
Yeah.
That's what they are. So, agribusiness in California has always depended on cheap labor. They've always seen to it that somebody was brought in that was poorer and hungrier than the local residents, and they were the ones that ended up in the labor camps. The Great Sarath is the story of agricultural labor here, but it's, you know, it was the whites coming from Oklahoma and Arkansas. Basically, just like the Filipinos have come, just like the Mexicans have come, they were enticed over here by growers that went when they were having the Dust Bowl period over there, and they were, you know, getting kicked off the land as sharecroppers. The big farmers here went over there and advertised, "Come pick oranges in California for $3 a crate." Well, they swamped the labor market, and when they got here, they paid them 10 cents a crate. You know,
There's so many of them.
There's so many of them. So it was, you know, it's always been almost immoral how they have brought poor, hungry people to this area to work in agriculture. And they say, well, you know, we provide the nation's food. Well, that's true, but everybody makes out we get nice, cheap vegetables and fruits and all that. And the grower makes a nice profit, and the people, it's on the backs of the laborers that we do it. So anyway, you can take this file. This
Awesome.
Your dad bought him a copy, I know.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I have a question about you personally. Like, so when did you work? Because I remember you and Granddad would have said some things.
Yeah. If you grew up here in the barrio as a kid, you know, they didn't have child labor laws that applied much to agriculture. You know, the unions had gotten child labor laws passed because they used to use kids in the mines because they were small, in the coal mines. That's why they used them, because they were
getting
small.
to places.
Yeah. And there was no labor laws until, you know, the collective bargaining laws passed and all that, child labor. But agriculture, like I said, was never covered. So a migrant family would come, and the kids, you know, 7, 8 years old would be out there working in the fields too. So if you lived in the barrio, I mean, we were lucky because our dad had a full-time job, a good job, the railroad. I mean, the railroads saved a lot of Mexican families. There was a whole class of people. All my dad's friends were railroaders. My godfather was a railroader. You know, that was a whole culture. And they came to replace the Chinese who were brought over to build the rails to start with. Then they had the Chinese Exclusion Act forbidding any more importation of Chinese. And then the Mexicans started doing it about the time of the Mexican Revolution. So that's when my dad's dad came to work on the railroads. He went to Muskogee, Oklahoma first. That's where he was from. Yeah, Muskogee. But anyway, so our family was lucky that our dad had a full-time, steady job with some benefits, right? But if you lived in the barrio, the trucks would come by in the morning to pick up the crews to go out and work in various things that were being harvested or planted or whatever. And as a kid, your buddies were going, so you might as well go. And you got paid. When I started, we were getting 85 cents an hour. That was the pay, 85 cents an hour. So, you know, as a 12-year-old kid working 10 hours, you know, you got some money, you know.
This was during the summer?
Yeah, during the summer.
Okay.
And we mainly worked in the grapes. And but the crews would come, the labor contractor, he had a contract with the Jamaras or the Georgios, the big grape farms. And it was up to him to get the crew together. So he usually had a truck, a big, bigger than a pickup, usually 2 sizes bigger than a pickup, that would hold maybe 15 people in the back, right? And usually a canvas carp over everything. And then he'd go around the neighborhood and toot his horn twice. And then if you didn't make it, he'd drive off to the next place.
You jump in the back
So
of the
yeah,
pickup?
jump in the back of the pickup.
Just like all these people
Yeah,
in there.
jump in the back. And in the summertime, even in the summer, early in the morning, it was cold, you know, he'd sit in there. And then, when he got everybody loaded, he would go to the ice house over here on Union.
Mm-hmm.
Had a big barrel on the back of the truck, kind of chained on. 2 barrels, one chained on and the other one was sitting in there. And he'd fill them full of ice, big blocks of ice, and then water. And then we'd go out to the field. Go to Arvin, Lamont, or Delano, that area. We liked Arvin and Lamont because the grapes were clean underneath. Delano was stickers and all. You could tell the difference between the fields. Because you'd be crawling on your hands and knees underneath the vines, right? So
you were cutting them off and
well,
putting them in the boxes?
This is why Caesar picked grapes. Because grapes require a lot of labor, a lot of hand labor.
Oh.
You know, you pick peaches, you pick plums, you know, you just pick them. But grapes, starting early, we didn't do that. They had crews, though, that would start in February and March, doing what they call the poda, the pruning. That took some skill. You had to know how to do it. And they would go out every vine, every field. They would what's the word in English? I don't know. Poda.
Prune.
Prune, yeah, prune.
Yeah.
They would prune and tie the vines, because there's a stake in the ground and then with a T on it, about that high. And then the T goes about that far. And then the stake is about one right here and the other one is that wall. Maybe a little shorter. And then there'd be 3 wires on the T that would go from T to T. And then the grape plant would grow along the stake. And then the vines would go both ways. And then they'd prune them and tie them with this, you know, the kind of cord they used to tie. Well, you guys don't remember the ice, big blocks of ice. Kind of a silky type of cord. But anyway, they use that to tie the vines. So that's a whole couple of crews, a lot of crews going out and doing that. But those are generally old veterans that know how to do the pruning, with some skills. Then, in early summer, when we would start, we did what they call the girly. The plant, usually it's a little thicker than this, because you don't pick them when they're still too young, when they get older. Usually, maybe twice the size of this. And then you had a knife that had it was like, had a handle, and then a blade that went like that. The blade, it was the hollow in here, right? And the blade went like that. And then with this part here, this end of the knife, you would cut a groove around the trunk of the tree, all the way around. I love to do that. It just felt really good. And then you were through. You'd go to the next one. But that little groove had something to do with sugar content and fluid, whatever. It was scientific.
Yeah.
You could tell how old a plant was by how many scars it had. Because it would, heal over the next season. And you could tell how many times that had been done the girly to. Girly, I don't know if it comes from girdle or what, but they call it a girly. And you cut that groove around every plant in the field. Every one.
Knees.
On your knees. Yeah, you could get up and walk to the next one and get down. So that was when the leaves were coming out and the little bitty bunches were starting to come out. And then scientifically that had something to do with the sugar content and all that. So you had to do every plant in the field. Then when the grapes are, the bunches are grown, see this is the bunch, and then it's got about, maybe 6 big loose, and the grapes are on there.
Mhm.
And then in the center, there are grapes that grow down like that, and they're tightly packed. Okay?
Right.
Well, then this was the big part of the summer before the picking. You have to go through every field, and what they call deshojando, taking leaves off. You would make sure that every bunch was hanging down and not tangled in the wire and all that, hanging down nicely. And then you would pull off all the leaves underneath,
Right out, under.
so you could see the bunch. So when you came ready to pick, you didn't have to look for it; they're hanging.
Okay, yeah.
But you also went in with clippers and you cut this part of the bunch off. That was gone. You cut all of that off.
You left the top.
And it just fell. And you would leave the big bunch like that.
Oh.
That had a couple of reasons for it. One, that bunch, what was left was the size of the crate for packing.
Wow.
Okay, because if you had to pack it with that, and it's all messed up. Second, because they're tightly packed, they would get mildew sometimes. That part would get mildew. And then, when you get rid of that many grapes, the remaining grapes are going to be bigger and sweeter.
Oh, because they're taking
Yeah,
up all the
because
nourishment.
you're getting rid of all of that. So these are going to be bigger and they're going to be sweeter. You go through every bunch in the field, in every field. And then not only do you cut that off, but you deshojar. You take the leaves off and you make sure that all the bunches are hanging. And if there are too many bunches, they want about 20 bunches on each side of the plant. And if there are too many, you just cut some off and they drop them. You go through the field and do all of that. And that lasts about a month doing that all over the southern end of the valley. These are table grapes, not wine grapes, table grapes.
Okay, yeah.
So then, when the picking starts, right, like end of June, early July, the first picking, you got to go out there, and the crew chief will tell you, he'll get a bunch and he'll taste them, and they have a little gizmo, a little thing that reads the sugar content. You squeeze the sugar on the thing and it calculates, sort of like when you do your blood test.
Right.
It'll tell you what the sugar content is. It has to be at a certain level or the inspectors won't let it be harvested. So they'll get a bunch, and you can tell by the color they're getting a little bit yellowish.
Oh yeah.
They're getting ripe.
Yeah.
And they give you one to taste, Dummy me, I used to eat them. By midday, I was being throwing up grapes. Instead of just tasting them, I'd eat the whole damn thing.
Wine sip and spit it out. Supposed to spit it out.
So they said, okay, the first picking, then you go, and that's what you would pick, what looked like it was ripe. If you happen to pick a crate and they weren't, the inspectors would inspect them, they'd dump them right out on the ground.
Wow.
Yeah, so they, and if you did that too often, they'd kick you out. It wouldn't work. So that, in those days, they had packing sheds in Lerdo and in Arvin and Edison over there. We would pick in big crates. And then the guys at Swamp, they call it, loading the big crates on the back of a truck, maybe 10 high, bunch of guys. Usually it was a football player from BC, they got the better jobs. And they would take them to the packing shed. Then there'd be a lot of women in the packing shed. My mother used to do it with Kuka next door, she was the floor chief. And they would go and you set them up. I did that when I got back from Spain with my